Welcome to Melanin Convos, where we hold space for real stories, sacred healing, and deep connection.
One faith, two voices, unpacking healing, culture, and everything in between. Let's talk.
Welcome to Melanin Convos. I'm Nikita, your host, and we are in season 3 of the rebrand of Melanin Convos. And as you can see, I have a co-host. It is my husband, Nigel, and a little bit of backstory of how we even got to this place. When I started Melanin Convos 2 years ago, I really wanted a co-host. I wanted to be able to have this conversation about motherhood, about amplifying Black voices, about culture, spirituality, and just all the things that we live through and deal with as moms. I wanted to do that with another mom, and I couldn't really find someone to do that with me. And I just put that idea on the shelf for a little bit. And then earlier this year, Nigel was like, "Oh, what if we did the podcast together?" And at first, I was like, no, I don't want to do the podcast with you. And it's not because I don't love you, but I didn't want to do a marriage focused podcast. I still very much wanted this podcast, this platform to be about amplifying Black voices, about culture, about mental health, faith. And I didn't want it to surround marriage relationships. That's what I didn't want, and that's what I was a little bit fearful of. But Nigel helped me to see that, it can be both. We can do both. We can stay true to what the purpose and the mission is, and it still be the both of us doing it. So that's how we're here today. Nigel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for welcoming me to Melanin Convos as one of the co-hosts or as the co-host. I am Nigel. I am Nikita's husband. I am also the father of one child. And we praise the Lord for that one child. Uh, yeah, with that, I am a mental health therapist. I have been in the field for about 2.5 years, close to 3. I love what I do. I love being able to support people, journey with people in that space. I am so excited to be a part of Melanin Combos in this way. Of course, being Nikita's husband, I'm always kind of been a part of Melanin Combos in other aspects in other areas. But to be on the pod, it's gonna be, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited. Yeah.
So you gave a little bit of tidbit about who you are. I have 3 icebreaker questions. Just so people can get a little bit more of an idea of your personality. And I'll answer the questions too for anyone who's first time listener. Okay, so here are my questions. 1, what do you do for unwinding? What do you like to do to unwind and just by yourself? The second one is, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you or that you've ever done? And the third one is, what's your favorite meal?
Okay. All right. So, hobby or unwinding. I like to read. I play video games. I go to the gym. But I just like being in my house. I'm very much a house body. Unless we're traveling, I like to be in my house. So, that's me in that regard. Crazy thing that ever happened to me. When we were traveling to Italy, so we went to London back in September
Oh
23,
yeah.
and then spent 2 days in Italy. Took a plane, got off the plane. We are in this little bus train that you transportation that takes you from the plane to the airport. Door closes, and boom, I
And you
realized
can't go back out.
I can't go back out. I realized I don't have my phone. I left my phone on the plane.
Mhm.
So I'm in a panic. We're in a whole different country. Some of the workers don't speak English, so I'm
Yeah.
here panicking because I'm like, I can't Like it's my phone. I can't lose my phone. Um, and yeah, like I'm a guy. I don't lose things. I have a little pride and joy that like I don't
Yeah.
misplace things. I don't just leave things anywhere, especially if they have like value to me or anything like that. So for that
Mhm.
to happen, yeah, I was in like a panic essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and it
Um,
took a while because we the line to go through security to get into Italy was so
yeah.
long,
Yeah.
and we had to wait till we went through security and then talk to like an agent on the other side. It was a time.
Yeah,
It was,
it
yeah.
was it was very stressful. But yeah, you know, two years later, my phone's still here, alive and kicking. So we thank the Lord. Favorite meal? I don't really have a favorite meal. I'm not picky. Um,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, I'm not picky. I can eat like the same thing weeks on
mhm.
end and not
What's something that
not
is
really
your,
care. Hmm.
what is a meal that you are like, oh, I have to have that. Like, oh, I can't wait to eat that.
Yeah, I'll Caribbean. I'll do my little jerk chicken, rice and peas. Yeah, let's do that.
Caribbean.
And I think that's me in terms of like why kind of when it comes to traveling, I don't care to go to the Caribbean, but if it's Jamaica, I'm going. In that regard, it's Jamaica. Like it's
Okay, wow.
Jamaica. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
all right, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, well, I'll answer the questions in the reverse. So my
Okay.
favorite meal is like brunch food. I love brunch. Um
Yeah.
like all of it. Eggs Benedict, chicken and waffles, French toast, all of it. I love brunch. That's my favorite meal. I get very happy about that. I even kind of still lament a little bit when my mom suggested having a brunch wedding, and I was like, no, I should have just went with the brunch wedding. That's how much I love brunch. Um, the next question is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. Okay, so it is also a traveling
Hmm.
story. So, my sister and I went to Amsterdam,
Hmm. Yeah.
and we on our way back, like going back to London, we didn't book the same flight. So we thought we booked the same flight, but we didn't. So we went to go check into one of the flights. It wouldn't let us check in. We're like, why? And then when we went to go check in to her flight, it let us check in. And then we realized that we actually booked two different flights. And her flight, or my flight rather, was like leaving now. So we're like panicking in the airport, going to the desk for Ryanair and asking them, okay, like when's the next flight? They're like, tomorrow. We're like, what? Like we can't stay in Amsterdam a day. This is supposed to be a day trip. We don't have any like clothes, nothing. Like, no, we need to go back to London today. So they're like, yeah, your best option is to try to like be like the gate. So me and my sister are rushing through security and like rushing the people, which is quite wild because we don't speak Dutch and they don't speak English and they could
Yeah.
have told us at the
Yeah.
airport. And then we get through and my sister's like running down the terminal to get to like her flight. And then I get to mine.
Hmm.
When I get to London, I can't find my sister. And I didn't even remember who she flew with so that I can like check
Hmm.
the, you check the
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
um, at the airport. And so I just sat there. And at that time, like I didn't have a cell phone to use so that I could call her or call anybody. So I'm just sitting there. Come to find out that when we thought my sister was supposed to leave, she actually ended up sitting on the tarmac for like an hour and she fell asleep. So when she thought that they were flying off in the air, they were still in Amsterdam, and I'm in London,
Yikes.
sitting there waiting for him. It was wild, and it was crazy because that was like our first international trip like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, like we were just like it's wild. The one of the wild things that ever happened to me. What do I like to do? My mom doesn't even know this story. What do I like to do to unwind? I love going outside. I love
Yeah.
experiences. Like I will love a date. I love like hosting people at my house. I love all of those things. So you can see that we're like real opposite on that. But I
Yeah.
think I also do like being by myself,
Mhm. Yeah, I
not
can agree
doing
with that.
any watching TV and like just laying down, not doing anything, like journaling or reading. But I think I tend to lean towards more like doing things as people
Hmm.
um, right now. But yeah, I think I like a little bit of both. So yeah. Yeah, so that's Nigel and me. So we can jump right into this conversation on why we decided to do the podcast in this way and what you can look forward in this season and going forward. One thing that's like really important to me is that although like we are married and we will have conversations about marriage, that this is not a marriage podcast. The focus is not marriage, but we will talk about relationships. And because we are Christians, a lot of the conversation, not a lot, all of the conversation will be through a gospel focus. um, so that is something that we want to highlight, that we will be talking about like romantic relationships, friendships, community, family, mentoring relationships through that lens.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think even as we navigate, a lot of different conversations talking about, different things, but just having that gospel focus or just that
Mhm.
gospel lens, I think that's important because, if you're identifying as a Christian, there are certain things that you're going to do differently. Your approaches are going to be different. How you handle people should be different.
Yeah.
And just with all of that, like conflict and love and grace and accountability, just looking at all the like different topics and themes through that lens, and just having conversations about that. How do we show up in these spaces as Christians? How do we interact with conflict as a Christian, and accountability and love, and all of those aspects? Because we are growing as individuals, but we should also be growing in our faith, and that should, deepen or at least challenge our perspective on certain things as we grow and evolve. So I think if I was to use like myself as an example, I think definitely my perspective on repair when it comes to like relationships has changed over the years. I think
Yeah.
when I was much younger, my teens, early 20s, whatever the case may be, any any ripple or any wound or tear in the friendship, there was no real repair happening. It was just
Mhm.
isolation, go our separate ways. There's no closure. There's no repairing, reconciliation. None of that is really happening. You're just burying it and moving on, being cordial if you see the person or a
Right,
group of
right.
people, whatever the case may be, or ignoring them altogether, avoiding them altogether. But I think definitely as since I've gotten older, since I've gotten older, since I've gotten married, being a father, like a lot of life transitions, so to say. But with that, that has changed as well over the years, and just how I go about repair. I think, over the last few years, I've been more intentional with having those conversations, being honest in those conversations. I think that has changed, that has grown. I still think I'm in, I don't know if it's a gray area, but I think one of the things that I've
Okay.
been wrestling with, or something that just maybe prevents me from repairing or reconciling, is just like, what do I want from those
Right.
relationships after the repair, and because I don't know completely what I want, I don't initiate the repair, essentially. So it's that aspect of like, I know repair is necessary. I see the value in repairing and
Mhm.
reconciliation and whatnot, but I think in my mind, it's like, okay, what's next after that? And because I don't know what the next will look like, or what I even want, it kind of prevents me from repairing in certain regards or certain spaces. but apart from that, like, yeah, my relationship with like repair and relationships has kind of shifted and changed a little bit over the years. Yeah. How
So
about
what are
you?
you doing differently?
Yeah, it's just being more open to conversations. I think, is
Okay.
is confronting the wound, confronting the offense, so to say, and just being open to having those conversations, and just being transparent in that moment, with that individual, and allowing both sides to be heard and to be understood, and then moving forward. And I think in those moments where repair has happened, I knew what I wanted, essentially. So I think that's been easy. Like, when you know, when you want something,
Yeah.
it gives you a sort of direction. It gives you a
What's
sort
an
of
example of something that you've wanted?
I think one example would have just been the aspect of wanting to maintain that relationship, or and
Okay.
maintaining that friendship with that individual. And I think it was a part of me wanting to maintain that was also acknowledging my part in the relationship in terms of the wound that I've caused. So I think why we um, don't, reconcile or repair relationships, because maybe we're not ready to confront our part and our role that we had in the wound that
Right.
was
Yeah.
caused. Because I do think wounds can be on both sides, essentially. So I
Of
think,
course.
we play the victim card a lot, and I think when we play the victim card, we prevent ourselves, or we don't give ourselves the opportunity to reflect inwardly and to take accountability for
Mhm.
how our actions have impacted or influenced the other person to do something, right? So I think that was, a part of my journey in that situation, that I, had to take accountability for
Right.
what I did in the wound that I caused, and being able to, maintain that relationship now. And it was a great conversation, that I had with
Mhm.
said individual, and the relationship's kicking alive and well. Yeah.
That's amazing. I I'm glad that I'm glad that there was a positive outcome for you with that repair, because now like you can use that as a model for how
Right.
you do repair with other people.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
myself, something that has like really challenged my perspective is me just learning how to show an affection towards people that I may not agree with, and how
Mm-hmm.
to separate their personhood from something they've done. And of course, what I'm not promoting is like, what's the word? I'm not promoting being gracious to toxic and problematic behavior.
Okay.
Of course, 100%, like I am taking note of patterns,
Mm-hmm.
but I am not necessarily saying because that person did this, that means that their whole character
Right.
is not.
Yeah.
Trying to be very intentional about that, and not doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and just taking people like for who they are as a person, being very intentional about restoring dignity and respect, and seeing people as the image bearers that they are,
Mm-hmm.
regardless if they're Christian or not, regardless if I agree with them or not. Seeing them in that light has really helped me to be a little bit more compassionate, particularly for marginalized groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also in me separating people's personhood from behavior, I think it has allowed me to really be reflective on the relationship, and um how like to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in a lot of ways, like for example, if I'm in a relationship with someone and they do something and I'm just like, that seems off. I don't really like that. That's not really something that I would want to be connected to.
Yeah.
And if I notice that it's a pattern, I'm like, I don't know if I want to like be in such intimate relationship with that individual. I'm not necessarily like cutting them off or like ghosting them, but I think
Mm-hmm.
I will just take a step back on how much output I put in fostering and creating a relationship, especially when we don't have that much relational capital. When like much has not been invested, I am more willing to take a little bit of a step back and not necessarily have. I don't think it needs a conversation. Unless they want to have unless the person wants to have a conversation with me, but I'm willing to just take a step back and just treat them as an acquaintance and no longer continue to pursue a more like in-depth relationship because it just doesn't align for me, and I think that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
um but of course, like if it's someone who is my friend, you're in my inner circle, like me being more willing, and I don't think I've ever really had a problem with this, but being more willing with those people to have a conversation about what was done or what was said, and figuring out what went wrong and then course correcting so that the relationship can be maintained. So I think, yeah, that's one of the biggest ways that like I've been working through my perspective on that.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that inner reflection or taking the time to reflect is it's a transferable skill. I think that's something
Yeah,
that needs to be used across any space, relationship, whatever the case may be, or wherever you would kind of like find yourself. Like being reflective is very important, and I think that's a skill that um, we don't use enough. So yeah,
yeah, truly underrated.
yeah. So kudos to you, for being able to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll move along to our second reason. So if you are familiar with Melanin Convos when it was primarily a motherhood platform, you will know that something that I'm really passionate about is amplifying Black voices and telling our stories and creating a space of liberation. So that is something that we will be transferring. This space is for Black voices, for Black liberation, for having hard conversations about faith and Blackness, having hard conversations about what it means to show up in our fullness as a Black individual, how we do that in motherhood, in our careers, with our spouse, and just all the aspects, and just considering what that means when we are in faith spaces as well. And because I'm like super passionate about it,
Mhm.
yeah, I love having this conversation, and it's something that I do think that we need to talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the difficulties that I've probably observed over the years is just having, these gospel centered conversations that sometimes don't include culture, race, or collective liberation enough, or if at all.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, here on this podcast, we wanna talk about that. What does healing look like? Our history, identity, all of these different racial type conversations, or that deals with identity in the Black diaspora and along those lines. We want to talk about that. We want to explore what that intersection of faith and race looks like for the Black individual. And I think if we were honest with ourselves, that we've had more experience with that than we've had language for. And I think
Yeah.
it's important to explore at least like what language can look like, just giving you an idea of what you are experiencing, or just giving you language for what you're experiencing. So I think for me, like, I think there's been like two standout experiences. I think the first one for me was like around when George Floyd had passed away, and
And
the
George Floyd
response.
was murdered.
Yes, murder. But I'm just saying in the
Right?
context,
This
like,
is
him.
important.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that correction. George Floyd's murder. But just the response, the global response from
Yeah.
the entire world, and how people were responding to that. And I think one of the topics that I was kind of having like brief conversation with someone was just like, how do we respond as Christians, Black Christians, what comes
Yeah.
first for us? Is it our um, identity as a Christian, or is it our blackness?
Mhm.
What comes first? What do we do? And I think even the context of that was there was a lot of riots happening across the globe, but especially more specifically where George Floyd resided. And it was just that conversation of like, is this right? Can Christians participate in this? Can Black Christians participate in this? That question, what comes first? Is it my
Yeah.
blackness, or is it my Christian faith? So just exploring that, or having that brief conversation with that person. And I think I kind of approached it just with the lens of understanding that I think we as Christians should always strive to understand the lived experience of everyone and anyone. But I think it's then the question of what are your not only personal convictions, but what does the Bible say, or what is your conversation like or relationship like with the Lord in terms of what you can do and what you can't do? Because I think
Yeah.
attending a protest isn't bad, it's not wrong or anything along those lines, but it's also thinking about your actions, what you say, what you do, and how that impacts your witness, right? So I think there's a fine, not a, I guess a fine line, or just a thread that can connect Christianity and your blackness, and how you show up in certain spaces.
And I
Uh,
think if you're being honest, I think, I mean, I'll just be really blunt about it. That I think ask like I find that like people ask or have these conversations as a cop out to not participating in social justice things. Like I feel like as a Christian, we should be standing for people who are marginalized, period. Obviously, I'm not telling you to go and be violent, but I don't
right.
see how you participating in a protest. Like, why is that even a question to ask if you should be standing along someone whose rights are being taken away? Or like just protesting for the acknowledgement of harm that is being done. I think, yes, as a Christian, we should be doing that. We are called to look after like people who are widowed, who are sick, who are oppressed. Like, like that's part of who we are. And I think that does include social justice as well. I think right now, even as you mentioned, the whole conversation about what comes first, I think even like as of date of this recording, like the Sinners movie just came out and that dialogue is like all over the internet about like what comes first. And I think I don't know, like I think for me, I think it is absolutely necessary for Christians, period, to know the history of their faith. Like I think
Mhm.
Christians don't know enough history about their faith, and then as in particular to like Black Christians, knowing like our history in faith and how faith was given to us, how we got into
Mhm.
where we are, how we've come to demonize a lot of things, and like how are we able to, how have we come to do that? And I'm really looking forward to having a conversation about spirituality, because I am noticing a lot of correspondence about like the demonizing and calling almost everything that isn't Christianity witchcraft outside of other like
Yeah.
we don't call Hinduism witchcraft, and we don't call Buddhism witchcraft, right? So it's just like that conversation, and there's just unpacking that and really taking a real deep dive on like when like certain places in Africa were colonized and how
Yeah.
colonizers called certain practices witchcraft that were a part of African spirituality, right? And just
Mhm.
like looking at that, us like talking through that, because what I'm not saying is that it isn't. I don't know. That's learning that like we'll have to do. But I think what bothers me is how quick, and particularly Black Christians, are to
Yeah.
calling everything that is African spirituality witchcraft. That
Witchcraft.
that
Yeah.
really does bother me. And I think we need to take a little deeper dive on why we do that and how we've been conditioned through colonization to see everything from that part of the world
As
as
which,
witchcraft or as
yeah,
bad, whatever
yeah.
the case may be. So, yeah, I do think it is important for us to have like these conversations and really to understand our like understanding our history and being honest about like the hard things. This is part of the hard thing. And there are other things that
Yeah.
are hard and that we don't really talk a lot about. And for me on my like Christian journey right now, I spent a lot of time thinking about reading about like suffering and just like dealing with like spiritual doubt,
Hmm.
and what does it mean to actually live the will of God? Like, what does it actually mean to live out this Christian life, aside from the things that we've deemed and glorify the Christian life, right? I think like we've, especially particularly us, like in the West, we have created this goalpost for what
Hmm.
it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a Christian woman. You need to
Okay.
get married, you need to have kids, you need
Yeah.
to capacity, you need like all of these like markers, and it's like, okay, well, you need
Hmm.
to buy a house, you need to own this type of car, you like all of
Right.
these things. Okay, well, is that the will of God for everybody's life? And if not, then what? Right? And what does it mean to suffer or experience the suffering of unmet desires, while either you're waiting for it or while God is telling you no? Or what does it mean to redirect your eyes to what the Lord is calling you to do in your life? Because I feel like something that we don't talk about enough is we get so caught up on this one thing, and God is trying to redirect us to something else. But because we're so focused on this, we can't
Yeah.
even see the markers or the
The
ways in God,
signs.
signs that
Yeah.
God is leading us to see and do something different, because we're so caught up trying to achieve this thing that all of the signs are passing us by, and we don't even notice that the Lord is speaking to us. He is telling us, but we don't notice because this is
We're
the
so
like
caught
this
up.
is
Yeah.
right. And I'm not saying like these things are not good things and they're not holy things and they're not things that we should be striving for as Christians. I think I just wonder about how do we have like these hard conversations about
Hmm.
what it means to be a Christian, what it means to experience spiritual doubt, what it means to wrestle with your faith, what it means to pick something up and just and like deconstruct or learn and put it down and then pick it up again, because like our growth is not linear.
Right.
Like we
Right.
will go through like seasons of dealing with grief or like dealing with doubt or dealing
Yeah.
with immense joy, right? And so just like going through that ebbs and flows, and just being honest
With
about,
ourselves. Yeah.
yeah, with ourselves.
Yeah. I absolutely I agree with that. Yeah. I think it's just that last part of just being honest with ourselves. And
Yeah.
ag- again, like being honest with yourself means that you're gonna have to confront some things that you once believed but you no longer align with, and having
Mhm.
that tough internal conversations. And I think, that brings us to kind of like reason number three of why we're doing this podcast, of like being honest about the hard stuff. We are here to be honest about the things that people may be quiet about.
Yeah.
Topics like resentment and ego and spiritual doubt and emotional burnout and just mental health and all of those aspects. We're here to be honest about it because we as well are humans. We're married. We have our own
Mhm.
family, and there are a lot of things that we are also experiencing. So we're going to be honest about like certain things that we've gone through, or things that we're currently navigating, or just what we've heard in these streets and in society, and just like what's happening in the world, giving our perspective on it. And of course, like, we're not experts, but we are being committed to truth, right? So even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard to sit with, we are going to have courage, and we're going to be brave and talk about these things and confront these things. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be beautiful. And yeah, we're here to talk about
I
the hard
agree.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. with everything like you said. I think we're committed to learning. I think I think the one thing that I love about the both of us is like being committed to being a lifelong student, and learning doesn't stop because we stopped schooling. And like being
Yeah.
committed to learning from each other, from our audience. And one of the things that I have always been like afraid of with like this podcast, and like having these types of conversation is people holding you to the thing that you said.
Mm,
And because I'm so aware of the fact that like my mind can change, like I can change my mind about a stance,
yeah.
and the fear of being held to something that I said 5 years ago, now that I've changed my mind. And obviously, like I don't think my core values will change.
Hmm.
But I think that is it is a fear for me, and just being very intentional and aware of like what we share, what we talk about, because again, like we aren't experts in any one thing, and I think it is important with every episode that we share, that everything is not for everyone, and
Yeah.
always take the meat and throw out the bones. If it doesn't apply, it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
And I think that also speaks to like our due diligence of making sure like whatever we do talk about on this platform, that we're being responsible, that we're not sharing anything that we don't want people to take away from. Um, I think that's the whole point of the podcast,
Hmm.
that we are sharing something that we want someone to take something away from. And if we think that it is, if we know that it's toxic, if we know that it is unhelpful or like just not a good perspective, then there's
Yeah.
no need just to put it out in the world.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think like that is our commitment to the podcast, to our learning, and to just being here and being present. So this is what you can expect this season. We're going to be talking about navigating faith and marriage,
Hmm.
therapy and mental health, Black identity and Christian faith, redefining submission and leadership. That one is going to be spicy. Unlearning toxic church culture. And yeah, just having these conversations again with a gospel lens, and hopefully hearing from you, our audience, on what you want us to talk about, what you are interested to know in our perspective, and how we can do the research to make this conversation not just our opinion, but full of like truth and facts. So yeah, really excited to start Melanin Convos Season 3, The Rebrand. And
Wonderful.
let's start.
Yeah, I think I share, same sentiments. I'm super excited to be a part of the pod in this capacity. Of course, doing all the background stuff and
Yeah.
supporting and all of that. So now, I guess being in the forefront. I guess that's what I'm
Yeah,
doing
you
now.
are.
Yeah,
Your voice
being
is on the
being
mic.
yeah, being in the forefront. Yeah, so just super excited to be on this journey of growth and exposure and all of those things. And yeah, so if you're tired of shallow conversations and want something real, just stick with us. Want something genuine, want something thought provoking. Yeah, hang
Yeah,
out with us, stick with us on this journey. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting, and you'll learn something. I think as Nikita said, like
absolutely.
take the meat, throw away the bone, and you'll go from there. Yeah,
Yeah. Where can people find you or find
yeah,
us?
yeah.
What's the
Of
handle?
course, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. This is Nigel. One underscore I think or two. I don't remember, guys. But you can definitely also find Nikita on Instagram at it's Nikita Renee. And of course, Melanin Convos. We have our own Instagram page. So please
Yeah,
check that out. Apart from the social media of Instagram, we are also on all other platforms such as Apple and Spotify. We're also going to be getting on YouTube very shortly. So stay tuned for that. And please, please, please share this episode with someone who needs these conversations. All right. Make sure to share, make sure to like, make sure to repost, and do all of that fun stuff. Support us as we will continue to support you guys. Yeah.
Okay, love you. Bye.